All right, listeners, it's Megan and Ryan, and welcome to the Mental Health Mixtape, a podcast dedicated to fostering open conversations, sharing stories, and exploring a diverse range of topics related to mental health. So, hold on to your seats as we sit down with some amazing guests to get their perspectives on the ever-changing landscape of mental health. For all you old folks, like me, no need to hit the record and pause button. Just sit back and let us navigate life's playlist together. During this podcast, you may hear stories about traumatic events and our guests' experiences. There may be discussions about suicide, traumatic events, and the outcomes from these events on their personal lives. If you are struggling with anything you hear, please reach out to your peer support team, psychologist, call 911, or head to the nearest hospital. In Canada, you could call Boots on the Ground, peer support for first responders, at 1-833-677-2668. Talk Suicide Canada at 1-833-456-4566. And in the US, call 988 for the National Crisis and Suicide Lifeline. Disclaimer. The information shared on this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only and should not be considered a substitute for professional medical or psychological advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Hey, well, nice to see you again, even though I see you all the time, right?
I know, just down the hall.
Yeah, just down the hall. So this is our kickoff episode. After yours and my little sit down last week, we're here with our first guest. I think I can fair in saying this is one of our favorite people in the world, certainly one of my favorite people in the world. Mm-hmm. And we're just absolutely honored and so humbled that he would take the time out of his exceptionally busy day and schedule to have some time with us. Do you want to introduce yourself? Mostly because I'll screw up your last name. Schaalje.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah. So Gregg, Schaalje, Rocky County, intern, pilot project, platoon captain right now.
Yeah.
I've been in the fire service career for 29 years. Massive mental health advocate, as you're aware.
Yeah.
And love my family, love my career. Happy where things are at right now, and I love my friends like you guys.
Yeah.
Huge, massive.
We're so lucky to be in that like sphere that you have for yourself, and you are like, I mean, not to get too formal with it, but like you started as a volunteer firefighter, and you worked your way up and came to the top of the heap when you were at a fire service. You can decide if you want to name that or not. You started over. You've rebuilt your career up to captain and now platoon captain.
Yeah.
You are the winner of the Queen's Jubilee Medal. You are the 2021 recipient of the Mental Health Advocate Award through CIPSRT. I mean, the accolades just go on and on and on.
I know. I was reading your bio, Megan sent me your bio, and I was like, what? Oh, those are the other things I didn't know about you. Yeah.
So, like, from a personal perspective, and then also just like what we want to do here, we couldn't have imagined having a better kickoff guest. So thank you for being with us. We're really appreciative of you taking the time.
I'm honored, especially inaugural. Yeah. It's pretty cool. And I mean, when you texted me, Megan, you said, hey, we want you to do this with Ryan. And I'm like, of course, why me? Like, I view myself as just another firefighter, mental health advocate that loves being able to, spread the word of how to try to stay mentally healthy and, be a good peer for your fellow firefighters, public safety personnel, frontline responders, and just push the message out.
Yeah.
So
totally. Well, Ryan and I were talking about it in our sort of first sit down chat, and then we were talking about it again even just this morning, and I think we're united. You can speak for yourself, obviously, but part of what we want to do with the guests who come to see us is just like, for good, for bad, for ugly, like how have you become the person that you are? Like you're sitting here today as a mental health advocate, like somewhere along the way that became important to you. And so that's what we want to chat about with you today is how did you become you?
Yeah, it's interesting because my sister and I have actually looked back on it because she's in the States and she works, in a ward where a lot of patients come in with, mental health challenges. And she works in the youth group, youth ward. And so we've actually talked back and forth a lot, and we actually believe it's actually, deeper than we think and deeper than we know. But really and you alluded to it already, Megan, my very first fire department that I ever was on Vancouver Island. And my first rescue call that I ever was on in the rescue was holding a light for the paramedic, because I'm a probationary volunteer firefighter, been on like 3 calls ever. And they said, okay, hold this light for the medics. And so I'm holding this light. And what had happened is, and it comes close to home for me because I used to go on this exact same road many, many times, is the road had a couple of dips in it, and there's a telephone pole halfway down. Well, this car went sideways, ripped off the roof. 2 people were entrapped. 3 people were thrown. And the 2 people that were trapped had burnt to death. So there I am as a probationary rookie volunteer firefighter, holding this light for the medics, for the patients that were still alive. And so it's like a video screen, as you're watching a TV, everything playing out, and the medics are like, to the left. So I'm like, okay, to the right, oh, okay. And that's all I was doing, just listening to it. And that fire chief, Bruce Everdahl, still remember his name, still remember what he did. That call came in. Our next training night was Monday. He had a psychologist come in. Yeah. CISM was only 3 years old.
I was going to say, this is
3 years old. Yeah. So it's cutting edge. Everly and Mitchell was probably just finished publishing. Like the covers still probably smelled fresh on everything they put out. Mm-hmm. He brought in a psychologist and talked with everybody that was at that call. And the steps that he went through and what he did with us was a massive lasting impact for me. Mm-hmm. And because it was on a First Nation, we actually were invited into the Longhouse for the ceremony, which again is unheard of. Mm-hmm. So from the start of the initial call, carrying a pager, tones go off, I race into the fire hall, getting in the rescue of all vehicles. In the rescue, get there, told what I'm supposed to do, did what I'm supposed to do, and then concluding the whole call months later or I guess it wasn't months, it was weeks later, but going into the Longhouse and being able to have the conclusion of the call take place. Mm-hmm. But the psychological help there and then. So I actually owe my whole mental health, because very few months in, I could have been done my career. Very few months in.
Well, and I have to admit, as I was listening to you tell that, I was like, oh man, what happened on the other side of that call? Like that. Yeah. I haven't heard you share that story before. And I was just like, because, back then at that particular moment in time, being a volunteer, it probably would have been more expected that you would have just gone home and show up the next time and no one would have talked about it.
Absolutely. And it doesn't even resonate with me until, 15 years later, 20 years later. All of a sudden you're looking back going, if it wasn't for that fire chief, maybe, just maybe, hearing Everly and Mitchell's news flash or whatever they did, fax report, because I guess they used fax machine, whatever it was that they put out, he read it and had the foresight to be able to bring a psychologist in to actually sit with us. And when I look back on it now, I'm like, thank you, Bruce. He's passed away since. I was going to say, is he still alive? Yeah, get him on the show. I wish I could, right? And to say thank you, Chief, for taking care of me now, and knowing that that ripple in the water has lasted this long, mm-hmm. and the impact I can have because of my chief of the day, mm-hmm. doing that for me and my fellow firefighters. Totally. So that's where it all began for me in the fire service. And then fast forward, I've helped build. CISM teams, the peer support teams in, 4 different fire departments, which is very fortunate, and learning what is good teaching and what is bad teaching along the way, which is very fortunate or unfortunate, however you want to look at it, mm-hmm. To just continue to be there for my fellow first responders. Doesn't matter what uniform they wear, doesn't matter how they wear it, we're there for them. And just to continue being that advocate for mental health and building resiliency. I got so excited when the BOS program rolled out. I'm not gonna lie, not because you're here, but it's just kind of like, oh my goodness, I paid the $200 because I wanted the program, got in the program, then I got it for free, and then I went in the program again, and I did it again, and then so it was just amazing.
Like it's so interesting. Like you even did the hand gesture of like the arc, right? Mm-hmm. And I think about that with these types of experiences, right? Where it's like there is the beginning, there's the middle, and unfortunately, I think a lot what happens for responders of whatever sector is you don't get that conclusion, and like the ability to be in the longhouse and be able to say goodbye to these community members in the way that you did, like it never takes it away from being a tragic, sad thing that happened, but you are able to have like a period on the end of this sentence and to feel like cared for in that process. And then I can't help but wonder, in the like sliding doors world, what would things have looked like for you if that didn't happen? You know what I mean?
Totally.
I was thinking about how progressive was that at the time, 28 years ago.
I know.
That is so progressive to think about. And then, like you mentioned, I always go back to the ripples.
Yeah.
You know, that one conversation or that one experience. And I do agree with Megan, some of the biggest struggles that I've had is what's the outcomes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right? You having the ability to find closure in that moment, although the experience isn't mitigated, it provides you with that complete finishing of the story, the beginning, middle, and end. So I mean, over what you just explained, there's so much power in the things you share.
How many times in our careers we don't know that period?
Yeah.
We don't know that period.
No.
We wonder, like, there was a time when I was at Foothills Fire Department where it was a really bad accident at a major intersection at the bottom of Heritage Point. And I looked at it and I said, there is no way. There is no way this individual is going to survive. We landed stars. She took off. And 3 months later, she's walking into our fire hall thanking us. And I'm like, I was blown away. There's the period that you survived. Yeah. So how many times, like you said, Ryan, do we go through our career, we don't know that period?
I'd say for me, it was like 90% of what I did.
Absolutely.
Unless I followed up meaningfully. And then, the struggles I had, and I don't know if you can share the same kind of thing, is being on the fire service as a paramedic, I get that transport piece unless we bring somebody along with you.
Yep.
Right? So there's some bits of closure, but once they hit that ED department, we're not allowed, or there's this idea that we're not allowed to follow up, even though we are, fellow healthcare workers. Yep. And there's been times where, speaking to the girl walking into the fire hall, I was going and getting a coffee, and my partner and I happened to be pulled aside by an individual and said, "Thank you for saving my life." I'm sorry, can you help me kind of understand what's going on?
Absolutely.
You arrested, I had a cardiac arrest a year ago, and you and your partner were the ones that actually made me get me to the hospital. Yep. And his family was there, tears were shed, and I'm like, okay, that's the moment, that's the period, like you said.
Yeah, and I always said I sometimes envy EMS because we're most of the times we're there ahead of EMS, so we hand over care. You guys get to take them to the hospital, and we're like, we don't know anything that happened on that transport. We don't know anything that happened after we loaded into stars. We don't know anything happened that beyond that. And I'm like, man, you guys are so lucky because you guys can figure it out. Now, it's
always that lucky, right?
Yeah, and so that is that period that we miss, and we sit here and go, oh man, like there's that period.
Well, and you're making my head start to go, because I feel like we need a new initiative of like a collective to actually somehow centralize what does happen to these calls and actually let people know, because it's so important, right? Otherwise, you're just probably at a risk of just going over and over and over. And did I do enough? Did I not do enough? Did I do the right thing? Right? Because you just don't know, right?
Well, and it's interesting because as I get here, I kind of opened up the door to my shift yesterday.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not aware of that. Like the last 24 hours have been like...
How many calls in how many minutes?
And 6 calls in 38 minutes, and they were not low intensity calls.
No.
And so what I did is on my way home, I called my deputy chief and I said, "Hey chief, can we debrief my actions on the way home?" Because I knew that is a bit of a conclusion for me. And I'm like, how did I do? And he goes, what you had at that moment and the types of calls you had, he says, I'm sitting back and armchair quarterbacking this whole thing by listening to the radio. And he goes, there was a time where I was ready to jump in. I'm like, nope, Scully has it. And he's like, you did well. You did really well. And so that was a bit of that conclusion for me to be able to say, okay, I did well. But that's on the incident command side. But on the patient care side, sometimes it's just not that easy.
Well, right. Like, I mean, I think the tactical or the strategic debrief or like, what can we learn operationally, fine, right? And I think, like you want to have that input going from an operational perspective. You did do a good job. There wouldn't be any, changes, but that can help. That in many ways is separate from like, you're still Scully. You're a guy, right? Like
totally.
Who just went to like a minimum of 6, like really high octane and
it's and it's all happening bang, bang, bang at the same time, and and then taking care of the crew for the most high intense aspect of all those calls. Your incident command, and then you're removing your incident command because the situation's under control, and now I instantly throw on my peer support hat. Instantly. And that's where I'm like, okay, now I got to take care of this crew, and I got to take care of my crew. And then I'm in radio communication with the other incident that's happening on the other side of our municipality, asking, is everything okay? Are you guys okay? And then, okay, that's taken care of. And so you're triaging the whole situation, but the hats you wear at a moment's notice is, it changes. Yeah, it changes. It totally does.
So like, you're just here with us, and, I think you and I know each other pretty well. And like, what's your process like taking care of you now? Like just being you, like you've just had a crazy 24 hours. Pardon me when I use the word crazy. I don't know what other words you use. Like what do you need to do now to take care of yourself?
So as I preach what I practice, practice what I preach. So got back to the fire hall, consumed a good chunk of water, like probably 1,000 milliliters of water, went downstairs and got on the rower and spent no less than 22 minutes on the rower at a high, I've got my heart rate monitor that I put on, and I try to maintain a heart rate of 130 or above.
So you're burning off some stress.
Yeah, totally burning off that dump that happened in our system. So I'm burning that off. And then I stay down there and I continue lifting weights. So I stayed down in the gym for about 45 minutes to an hour and constantly trying to keep my heart rate up. And that's what I tell people to do. And that's what I tell first responders to do is after a high octane call, water, good in, water in, go down and work out, and do that workout for no less. Totally. Yep. And I felt great. Like I had a very relaxing moment. And then no different than you, go home to Louie, my dog, my golden doodle, and put my face in him. And, and he's so happy to see me in the morning. I'm happy to see him. And I'm like, hey, Louie, do you want to go feed the horses? And then out the door we go and feed the horses, and then go to my horse, and I take my horse's neck and I put my nose, like just bury it in. And I'm just like, and equine therapy is amazing. And it just feels like, there's so many resets that kind of sort of happened. And the only next best thing that I'd be able to do is, get on the water and go for a paddleboard now. Yeah. And really that is truly the opportunity to flush things out and get that reset happening.
Is that spiritual for you, the paddleboard?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. 100%. It is, it connects me in so many different ways with, everything, with the spiritual being that I am and that I know, with the water, with just listening, with just floating, being on the water, focusing on, whether it be a moving body of water, whether it be in a standing body of water, just being on the water, feeling the water. Sometimes the water throws me in. That's okay, because it's a good reset.
Yeah, right.
It's cold.
Yeah, it is. And so it is. It's totally 100%. 100%.
Okay, so I have a question for both of you. Like in this work that I've done over these years, like I have really come to believe, and I'm just thinking about you, Scully, like you've just had some pretty intense calls, some people had some tragic things happen. You're going home to connect with your dog and your horses and you and your life, right? I have come to believe that if we are going to be witnesses to suffering, if we've been put on this earth to take care of one another in whatever kind of way that looks like, each one of us who's in that role needs a code. Like we need some way of thinking about why are we here, or what's the purpose of all this, right? And I don't think we all have to adhere to the same code or the same philosophy or whatever, but I think you need one. I think that is like a protective factor. Yeah. What do you guys think of that?
100%.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, what you said, and you know, the biggest question that comes to my mind before I answer yours is, for me, is, you know, it wasn't always like that, was it?
No.
Right?
No, not
How
at
long
all.
did it take you to develop that practice? Or at least build the understanding and awareness of what you needed along that trajectory, especially post calls? Because I know my process has been a little bit different. It's taken years to get there. Would I say that trajectory is similar for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say, you know, over the last, I'm going to say eight or so years, the routine really came to the forefront. And it wasn't until I met, you know, people like Megan, people like Jeff Sitch, people like Malcolm McNeil. Those individuals reinforced what it is post call, post high stress call, when you have that catecholamine dump into your system. What do you do to get rid of it?
Right.
You know, so it doesn't continue to build in your system. And so I'm going to say in the last 8 years, I've really become like aware and really try to become that opportunity to, I told my deputy chief this morning, my job is successful when we've trained my replacement. Then I've succeeded.
So would you say that's your ethos? Like, what is your personal ethos when it comes to what you do and how you process information? I know I have mine.
Yeah.
Right.
And I mean, I guess that if I feel joy and my heart is full when I'm able to know that I've been able to help somebody. And I mean, I look at it, and I've had people come up to me and I mean, I've had firefighters on the side of the road that are talking to me about going in front of a semi in a truck that's a fire. And to be able to see them today and be able to look them in the eye and say to them, I'm glad you're here. I'm happy you're here, and hug them. That, like, to me, that just fills my heart, because I know I've done everything in my training that I've been trained to do from, you know, like Megan, Jeff, you know, Malcolm, those guys that have trained me to do what I have as a peer. That is like, that fills my heart. And knowing that I go home, I see my family. You know, I see my daughter, my son, my wife, my dog, the horses. Like, it's like, okay, this is cool. Like that is cool.
And that's a similar ethos that I have. Like, for me, I can't remember who it was, Jay Shetty, maybe in one of his books or one of the podcasts I listened to, the in service of others. But not at the behest of my own. Right. And that's, I think, for me, and what you said really lands with me, because I've been doing peer support for a number of years, obviously taking training with Megan, and similar paths as far as the peer support piece. And I think that for me is really kind of distilled my personal ethos. That's that in service of others, but not at the behest of my own health.
Absolutely.
Right?
100%.
So that feeling of knowing that you got that person, or at least had the opportunity, you talked about the ripples earlier, right? That one conversation may start the ripples for them to really heal and start their own journey. Because it doesn't change. You're always on.
No, and like, I've spent in the last several years, I've spent a lot of talk on the front of a fire engine, sitting on the bumper of the fire engine, and just chatting with other first responders that are going through a tough time. And I'll talk to them, and I'm like, okay, let's pull up the website. So I pull up the Wayfound website and get it on your phone. Okay, let's do this together. I am not doing it. That first responder is doing it. And we work our way through it. They press get help. And to hear 2, 3, 4 months later, thank you. You know, like, that is just like, my heart grows so much to know that I was able to just help somebody. Now they've starting to build the resiliency within them, within their family. And they can start to spread that word. So there's the ripple, is they get to spread that word, and how to move forward and be a positive peer supporter, or know where to turn to focus. Because if they're not trained in peer support, we obviously want them to go to the peer support team that is trained, but at least open up that door to the peer support team, because they've been helped by the team. So that, you know, like, you go back to it, and at the end of the day, that's what really is something that, if I can help make the fire service or emergency services a little bit better place for helping, you know, do what I do, then Yeah.
Well, what strikes me, and I feel this way about both of you and other people as well, but I mean, it feels really alive here between us right now, is like, Scully, just listening to you, like you're such a thoughtful, deep, connected, articulate, sensitive person. And like, I think those are some of the loveliest things about you. And I could also see how, if you don't know how to take care of those parts of yourself, right, they could easily become corrupted, or they could be risk factors, right? Yeah. Like I've often thought, and I talk about this was a big part of sort of how I developed BOS, right, is like this notion of empathy as a risk factor, right? Like you have to care about other people to be able to be a carer, right? It's like, those are table stakes. And yet you have to learn, I think, how to take care of that sensitive, caring part of yourself, or else that's, I think, where we can get hurt.
Yeah. Well, it's, it's where I wear my heart on my sleeve.
Yeah.
I will cry at certain times. Like it's just like, cause I mean, it's funny and I'm going to share this. With Dr. Lawrence, when I was seeing Dr. Lawrence, I remember being in his office, and it was my final session with Dr. Lawrence, and I was crying like so. I couldn't believe it. I was just sitting there, and Dr. Lawrence just says, "It's all good.
Yeah,
let it go. Just let it go." And after I was done, I remember I looked out the window and I was like, "Oh my word! Like this is truly like it was as a page that I turned over." Yeah. And because I came here, because I had the opportunity to work with Dr. Lawrence, again, I feel stronger because I've been through it. I will never pretend that I'm a psychologist or a clinician or a therapist. Never. Yeah. I know where my line is in the sand, and I know when to hand that baton off to the professionals. Yeah. But it does help, it helps me become stronger. Like, when I have the opportunity to help mentor leaders to build a peer support team, I start off by saying one of the most basic things that you have to have for the peer support, and if you can't put this firefighter, EMS, paramedic, police officer, that you can't put this attribute beside them, then you don't have the right peer supporter. One word: altruistic. Mm-hmm. If you can't put that word beside them, that name, then you don't have the right person. And I honestly, truly feel that is one of the most powerful words for a peer supporter. Mm-hmm. Obviously you got empathy, and you got those words that follow it as well, being mindful and what have you. But that one is probably the one that I carry the most with me, because if you have that attribute, you talk about some of those other words that you talked about, those will lead you straight. Those will lead you on the path that you're not going to, harden yourself or do it for the wrong reasons. And so that's one word that keeps resounding in my mind whenever I help teams, develop as a peer support team. Or if I'm talking to leaders about building out a peer support team and where to go. So it's
and I think that's when I go back to that notion of code or whatever, and I like the way that you put that too. Like, I think that's sort of how I try to operationalize it for myself. It's like, the why are you doing this, right? And I think if we can answer that in a way that feels consistent with the values we hold, right? Like, I value giving to other people just to give, not because I think I'm going to receive something, or I value being of service because helping people, right? And I can certainly speak from my own personal experience. If I stray off course for those values, like I am not, like, that feels really bad, right? Like, I'm not doing well when that's what my life is showing, right? Yeah.
100%.
But to get there, you need to have that awareness that you starting to slip down. I'm reading an interesting book called Standing at the Edge by Joan Halifax, and she talks about altruistic behaviors. And the edge state that she defines is the pathological altruism, where you've slipped past that point of now you're doing it for self-gratification, or self-validation, right? So I just want to loop back to something that, popped into my head. You talked about wearing the two hats today, right?
Yeah.
From the platoon chief, right? You're looking at the entire thing, and then you put on your peer support.
Yeah.
So in one aspect, you're being a leader, and you lead from the front. You lead by example. That much I know about you. But what I'm hearing you say, and just correct me if I'm wrong, is that when you're doing peer support, you're standing beside.
Yeah.
You're not in front. You're not behind.
Yeah.
You're just there with.
Totally.
Holding space. How hard is that? I know for me, because I used to sit in a leadership position as assistant supervisor, how hard is that for you personally? And is there a process that you go through when you know you need to move into that peer support space? Do you have something that's formalized or informal, or does it just come naturally? Like, help me walk through that, because I know what my process was. I don't have one.
Well, you're not far off, Ryan. And here's the thing is, because our position that we're in today is a pilot position. It is a pilot project. If all goes well, and if all goes well, it's going to stay within our department.
Yeah.
And so there was no process. And I'll use tomorrow or yesterday's call as that. And so I'm sitting here, we're talking, we're doing the debrief on the call and how, is there anything we could have done different? And we had the whole crew there. We were together, on the highway, because the highway was totally blocked off, and we're talking about it. And I'm like, okay. And I guess maybe this was a process that was in the moment. If I could, I would have taken off my uniform shirt.
Right.
If I could.
Why?
Because I want to be right there in the trenches. Perfect. So I would have, but I'm like, okay, guys, we're changing strides here now. And so I announced that we're changing strides here now. And then I kind of like took a pause, and I'm like, how's everybody doing? Like, honestly, this is not an operational thing anymore. Is everybody okay? How are you guys doing? And I looked at each individual responder that was with me on the highway, and I said, are you okay? Are you okay? And so it was like a moment in time. I did not plan it. It was totally spur of the moment. It was what I felt just came naturally. And we talked it over with them, and I said, guys, remember, make sure you're getting lots of water in, let's get back to the fire hall. And then once we were back to the fire hall, the truck's back in service. I actually went and talked to the firefighters individually.
So it's an informal process, but it's grounded in the fact that you're just standing beside them.
Totally.
And I agree. Yeah. Taking that shirt off, that rank, that stripe.
Yeah.
We're so embroiled into this hierarchical kind of like structure, right?
Yeah.
So that was the question.
Yeah.
And me is like, you are a senior leader within your organization, yet you still recognize the fact that you still need to get rid of rank.
Totally. And I
informally. So
100%, right? Like and my family knows it, I know it, and you alluded to it at the very start there, Megan, where I've been all 5 stripes. Rank, I don't care. Yeah. Like, I honestly don't care about rank. Let's get to the person who wears the uniform. Let's get to the human being. And that's why when I look back on it, because there is actually one picture that when I was going through the pictures last night after I got back and looking at all the looking at the call, there's one picture where I was I could see myself wearing my uniform, and I'm like, okay, I wish I would have in the moment taken off my uniform shirt, put it on the bumper of the truck, on the engine, and said, okay, this is Scully, how are you guys doing? And do that formal transfer, into that peer. And however, the guys know me as the feelings guy around the hall. Yeah. So they know when
he's going to talk about feelings.
Yeah, here we go. And then standing back. But here's and we're sitting there. And so when I said, okay, I'm changing strides now, I'm totally changing, and then I paused so that everybody's like, oh, what's Scully doing now? And then they paused and they looked, and I'm like, okay. And then slowed my cadence down on my voice as well, because I'm not in that command role anymore. I'm like, how are you guys doing? Is everybody, how are you guys doing? I want to know.
Because, that's what I'm reflecting on, is that, like, you're aware of the fact that, not having this symbolic ability to take off your shirt meant something. Like, you're aware of that, which is huge, right? Yeah. And people know you, so they probably are like, whatever, like, they can see past the fact that you have the shirt on. it's cool that you know that would have been a really important symbolic thing to do.
Totally.
And you would do it in the future if you could.
Absolutely.
Right. But what you just spoke to, like you made an implicit process explicit, right? By saying, okay, we're changing strides, right? And I think this is one of the things that is so important. And we've been doing some work with leaders and whatever. It's like how you ask a question is important as the question you ask, right? Because I'm sure if someone comes in that's like, yeah, you're okay, you're all okay, right? You're still asking, are you all okay? But you're not inviting an answer, right? Whereas if you slow it down and you're really asking, it does, even if it's a closed-ended question, how you deliver it matters.
And
just thinking the same thing, like really you're dispelling the myth in that moment of what you did on the front side of the truck of rank. Right? And you're seeing, junior firefighters that are going, okay, wow, or platoon, okay. I can actually do this. This is amazing. So I mean, that has to be validated. I think the way you approach it, the implicit to explicit, like Megan just said, is huge. I never wore a rank doing the work with reintegration. Because I felt that was actually a barrier to
100%
doors for the conversation.
Absolutely.
I was supposed to wear whatever, a silver leaf on my shoulder flash, but I never did. And people ask me why, and I say because it's not about the rank.
And totally, and that's why I made that. That when I look at it, I said I'd like to have ripped my shirt off and had been just in my t-shirt, and then there's no rank, because I'm a huge believer in there is no rank in peer support. It's not, and so, but in the moment at that time, based on what the dynamic situation we were in, I tried to change like my the incident command cadence, voice, whatever role, and I very purposely stopped and vocalized, okay, I'm changing the role here, and I purposely did that. And then I slowed down the question and I looked into the eyes of each one of my 6 firefighters that were there, and I asked them, are you all right? And then I didn't say it again, are you all right? Are you all right? Are you all right? Are you okay? And I slowed it down. So I purposely changed, and I thought about it before I did it, because I'm like, okay, I want to do this here. I want to make sure, and then revisiting it later on. And then again, tomorrow I'm going to call each one of them and do my follow-up and just say, hey, I'm just doing a quick follow-up, because that's just what I believe in. And that's how I've also been trained as well. So it was a very purposeful, dynamic situation. And I guess if there was one regret, I just wish I didn't take my uniform shirt off, so I didn't have my, any bars on or anything. But moment, I tried to do the best I could.
You can overcome that, right? It's just, it's always occurred to me, and like I do think this has been a big part of what's oriented my work over the last 15 whatever years, is that this is a relational business that you're in. You have a lot of SOPs and you have a lot of protocols and ways in which you need to do it, but first and foremost, it's a relational business.
Totally.
You have to be able to form relationships with people and talk to them and have some ability to understand and reflect what they're experiencing.
Absolutely. It's and to understand what they're going through, or not what they're going through, or how to guide them to get help, like that's a pretty cool, like, it's that personal, like, so talk about understanding the family as well, because I've had firefighters that have actually had they called me and said, Scully, I know you're giving me help, but who do you recommend here? And I'm like, I've only got a couple of people that I turn them to, and I'm like, well, here you go, there you go. And they've actually come back and they actually have thanked me for helping their spouses out.
Well, thank you for that post this morning. That was awesome.
Yeah. And so I'm sitting here going, that's like I said, that just that gives me enough energy to run for another 20 years.
Totally. Dopamine burst, right?
Exactly.
Totally. So let me ask you something, because I go back and forth around this in my own mind all the time. And maybe the answer you would give now would be different than the answer you would have given 10 years ago. Do you think if you're starting your career now as a firefighter or a paramedic or a police officer, whatever, do you think you are destined to get psychologically injured?
Oh, I think the data shows that,
Yeah.
I mean, we've had this conversation. I think we talked about it on our first podcast is, average human or the average public, general public sees 3 traumatic events per year, and we see approximately 100 per year over the span of 28 years for you and 23 for me. Start putting the math together. I think for me, it's definitely we're at a high risk for occupational stress injuries. I think what's missing is the background foundational work and literacy and mental health training. I mean, sure, I work at Wayfound, but I think if we would take some of the concepts and current stuff, and I don't know if you agree, and put it on the front end of people's career and open up, change a culture, right?
Totally.
We could fundamentally shift the landscape of how mental health is viewed within our services across the nation.
Absolutely. And there's truly, I totally believe, like 100%. Working with Megan and the team here and the BOS team, like yourself and Shonda, and having the opportunity to be able to share the stage with somebody that is so dynamic that I felt like, oh my word, like I'm sitting here going,
now you're making Megan feel uncomfortable. This is great. She was earlier to you, and now it's like
so to be able to share the stage, and it was a really cool moment. And I'll get to my point here in a second, but there's Megan on the stage and she's doing her talk, and then I said, okay, I'm going to fire and ease this, and I'm going to bring it down to the firefighter. And so Megan would talk, and then I'd go blah blah. Megan would talk, and I'd go blah blah. And then after it was all done, it was like awesome. Like it was, we had never presented. We had never talked about.
That was in Manitoba.
It was the most.
We didn't even prepare. We had never presented together
ever, and it was just like wow. And Shonda, I remember she goes, "What did you guys do in Manitoba?" I'm like, we went on stage. I don't know.
Like we talked for an hour. I'm probably like I have no idea what we said.
Neither do I. And I'm just like, but it was so organic. So anyway, so we talked about the BOS program. We talked about what the foundation of it is. So back to like what Megan had asked, like, yeah, we are destined. I guarantee you, we are destined. However, with programs like, I got to see a glimpse of what Jeff Sitch was doing here for colleges,
right?
And what he's doing. Now you take that program, you take the BOS program, and now you're starting to see these building blocks of building resiliency before your career really gets going. And I'm like, man, I wish I had that. Like, I'm fortunate because I sort of had a glimpse of it when, on that first rescue call I ever went on. But did I know in the moment? Not a chance. Not a chance.
We got a 30-minute presentation in our paramedic course for CISM.
And which isn't anywhere close to being enough. So if we had those building blocks that is happening and that are now, and now I'm going to put on my peer support hat even a little bit tighter, is where we are evidence-based and we're following what the evidence says on how to build resiliency for first responders and not off these feel-good things, but we follow the evidence that we're actually building blocks for our first responders, our military, our public safety personnel can build resiliency at the start of their career is massive and huge. Because I do honestly believe that some of the skills that I employ after calls that I've taught myself and listened to experts talk about has made me stronger and maybe better and more resilient. Like in my resiliency, it doesn't disappear. I mean, it might weigh down where it's like, oh, I'm getting bogged down, but I employ those skills and I start to come back up again. And so that, it is the opportunity to be able to employ those skills, knowing what those skills are to be able to employ at that moment or very shortly after the call to help get me back on track sooner and faster. So I'm healthy for my family. I'm healthy for my wife, my son, my daughter. And that's what I want to be.
Well, it's a fixed versus growth mindset, right? Fixed, I must survive my shift. Growth is I have the tools and the abilities to move through the space of trauma to gain neutral buoyancy to come back to normal. And when I'm not, then I know the skills that I can employ to bring that back to bear. Right? And I didn't know that. Like, I had no idea because nobody talks about fixed or growth mindsets. Nobody talks about this stuff. And that's where, as a paramedic going through school, EMT school, EMR, EMT, paramedic, we're kind of left on our own.
Yep.
And then it's probably similar with most fire colleges, right?
Totally. And
here's your career. Have fun.
Yep.
Good luck. Do really good. Don't worry about the mental health piece.
Yep.
It's not going to affect you. And then you're sitting there wondering after a call, well, I could have done this different. I should do this different. And then you get stuck.
Yep.
Right.
And I, fortunate or unfortunately, I was able to take my EMT at the time in Saskatchewan. That much about mental health.
Yeah.
Then I took it when I was in fire college in Vermilion, so Alberta. That much about mental health. And I'm like, yes, granted, that was a couple of years ago that it happened, but like zero talk. And even today, why are psychologists and clinicians like Megan trying to get in there and promote a great program? Why is Jeff and Malcolm trying to get in there and promote a great program? Because they see, unfortunately, Wayfound is growing. Why? It's not like, you look at it and you're like, oh, it's not really that good to have Wayfound growing bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, because that means there's more OSIs, and it's like, we actually, hate to say it, Megan, but we want to put you out of work.
I completely agree. Unless we are going to be so much more about wellness than injury, right?
Yeah, and building that resiliency
totally.
Yeah, and so
I say that to my clients all the time. I'm like, I'm in work here to try to get you to fire me.
Yeah,
that nobody gets that. But I completely agree, right?
Yeah.
And I would really love it. I would love nothing else if we could be like solely focusing on proactive ways to help people take care of themselves, right?
Totally.
So I think I've told you too at some point along our relationships, and if not, it doesn't matter. But I did my dissertation research on post-traumatic growth, right? And one thing we could say is that the more trauma there is, the more opportunities for growth there is, right?
Absolutely.
But it does matter what happens between, when the trauma occurs and where that person ends up. And like, if you leave people alone, if you isolate them, if you shame them, if you, don't help them to understand what they're going through, they're not going to have the necessary ingredients to grow.
Yep.
But if you even put in just a little bit of a sprinkling of those ingredients, it's like remarkable.
Yep.
Where people can grow, develop, shift, change, right?
Yep, absolutely. It is. It's and I've read about post traumatic growth, and there is a lot of opportunity there. And through that growth you see what resiliency skills work best for you, because what works best for Ryan, what works best for Megan is totally different than what best for me. But to find them and then to hold on to them is like, and employ them.
Well, you two know that I took some time away this summer to try to work on myself a little bit, which was really, really necessary. And one of the fulcrums I played around with was this place between being and doing, right? And part of, I think, where I got so run down was in the doing. And I think that's one of the risk factors, right? Is that we are constantly pulled, like your last 24 hours, we're constantly pulled into activity. And one of the things I've sort of realized is that if you're doing things that are consistent with your values, you actually probably have a lot of road that you can go down before you're going to run into that burnout. And that's when the doing is inconsistent with what really matters to you. I think that's not so great. But I think we all need to have that balance between being and doing, right? Like you going and just sticking your head in your horse's neck, right? That's just a being.
Totally. And
you can't help but be present there.
Yeah.
Oh, and it's so weird. Like it's and when I tell horse people that, they're like,
Yeah,
isn't that awesome?
Totally.
And I'm like, it is so awesome.
Yeah.
And it's so weird because you tell a non-horseman, you're like, really?
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah. Yeah.
I stick my nose in my horse's neck.
Wow. Yeah. Oh yeah. And it's truly, it's to me, if I can't get on the water, Misty, I get my horse to come here. I'm like, there we go. Okay, there we go. Because it's the same, whatever it does inside my brain, it's like, ooh, that grounding. Being on the water, it's grounding and it brings you back. It's that, you talked about it earlier, it's that spiritual component for me that I know that, I know I'm not alone. I know and it's just like, and then when I go out into the mountains and, go paddleboarding in the mountains or on, on the can or whatever, and I'm surfing on the can, you look around.
Kananaskis?
Yeah, on the Kananaskis River. And called
For
the
those
can.
listeners around the world,
Yeah.
the river and just outside
The
of Calgary.
can
It's
could be the
absolutely-
prison.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Toilet.
that's right. Yeah. Good thing for clarification.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah,
you. And so it's you know, and being there, and you're actually, you know, surfing a standing wave, and you're looking around at the mountains, the evergreens, the trees, and you go,
yeah,
and you hear the rushing water go by.
yeah.
There is nothing that can compare to that.
You can't can that.
No, you can't can
Good.
it. Yeah,
Yeah.
even though you're on the can.
I know.
Yeah.
But you're
So-
on the can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it is, you know, you're sitting there going, you know, and then, you know, you're surfing for that, you know, 2 or 3 seconds, and then the wave decides to buck you off, and you're swimming now for your life, and you're trying to grab your board. But then you're refreshing, and you're like, whoo. And we talk about, you know, cold water therapy and different things. Well, that is ocean or mountain water
Mm-hmm.
that is minus just
150 degrees.
yeah, just above freezing. And it's like, whoa, it's so refreshing. Like, you get out and you're like, whoa, and your heart rate is going. It is such an exhilarating but refreshing and resetting moment, and it's awesome.
Yeah, you're not thinking about anything else, but
No.
you're falling into like
No,
freezing
and you're
water.
just hoping your line is still connected to your board, so when you grab your line, you go like this, that your board comes at you, you know, and there it is. Okay, on my board, and then paddle over to the side, and away you go. It's good that way. But
I need to get some guts and go and do this with you.
Oh,
sometime.
yeah,
Sign me up.
absolutely.
I got my
I
wetsuit.
know.
Yep.
So, question for you. So, like, I'm hearing a lot of vulnerability.
Yeah.
And courage to get to the place that you've gotten to. So, from a peer support lens, how do you actually? I know how I would do it, but how do you talk about being vulnerable with the people that you work with from a peer support side? Because that's the stigma that I still see. Is, you know, people don't see vulnerability as courage. You know, I don't know if you. Like, the research from Brené Brown talks about all the data sets and however many data sets she's got on courage is vulnerability. And I just want to hear it from you. Like, what do you feel is important when you're working with somebody or after a call, like being even self-compassionate, knowing that you're running the script in your head, because there's scripts that we all run, positive and negative.
And I'm not going to lie to you, Ryan. I don't know if I have a script.
Right.
It is all here.
Yeah.
Like, and there, when, you know, I go to talk to somebody on the front bumper of a fire engine, or out on the highway because I have a crew, or, you know, on the phone because somebody needs help, I honestly don't really have a script. I follow.
Would you say in that moment, just to reach out, there's a sense of vulnerability?
Yeah, I believe so. Like, and you know, if somebody's talking to me and they see I speak with passion, or I talk with passion, if they start to see water building up in my eyes because I'm about to cry, and that's just, if my voice starts to quiver or whatever, like,
because you're a human and it's impactful.
like, yeah, I mean, I can talk, you know, about where I've come from.
Right.
I can, and I have no problem. And once again, rank means zero to me.
Yeah.
Like, it means zero to me. I don't care about rank at any given time. It is being able to have that human connection, to be able to, I want people to see my heart and my soul and my vulnerability, to be able to help them out and help them cross this troubled moment that they're in. And, you know, like, I don't know, it's just, I truly don't have a script. Like I said, I'd be lying if I said, oh yeah, I'm going to pull that out of my pocket, I'm going to be like this and following it. I don't have one. It's what naturally comes. I rely on the training from professionals, how they've trained me, and that is been instilled. And so I follow that guideline, but I might be pulling something from this module, something for that module, something from this module, and it all just blends together at the right time because the conversation is organic. And like I said, I don't have any problem. I'm vulnerable enough that I'll freaking break down and cry. If that's what emotions are coming out in me at that time, it's not like I purposely do it, but if it's at that time in that moment, whatever comes out, it's gonna happen. Like, it's just that vulnerability of honestly sharing my emotion with that individual. I have no problem doing it any time.
No, and you know, Scully, like, as somebody who's been on the personal receiving end of that, like, that's how it feels, you know? Like, I just had tears come to my eyes when you said that about just like reaching out from a heart place, because I'm just thinking back to like you reaching out to me from a heart place, and like, it was so, like, it just is so sincere, you know? And like, you can really feel when someone cares about you, and like, that is such a gift, you know?
I don't know, honestly, I'm thankful for the gift, but like, you know, there's a text that I did to you, and I'm like, as corny as it sounds, it was like, in the moment I was thinking and reflecting on who you are as a human and who you are, and I'm like, the song popped into my head, and it was roar?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't care. Bam! And I sent it to Megan, and I'm like, and honestly, that was like, but that is not having this box to stay in, and like, I was totally outside that box, and I'm like, no, screw it. This is my feeling right now, and you need to roar. And I was just like, I'm sending it. I don't care. Bam! I sent it, and I'm like, I look back and I'm like, that's a good song. I like the song too, and but I hoped in that moment it may have, you know, whatever feelings or whatever moment that was for you, I hoped that it just kind of went, and it just picked you up just a little bit if you were down, or if you were having a good day, maybe it helped you get a little bit better. Like, but that was the vulnerability, is because this is how I feel in this moment about you. So I sent that text to say, this is what I'm thinking of you. This is how, and there was no thought other than what did my gut say in that moment at that time. This just feels right to do, and there was no script behind it.
Right. It's just the risk, right? It's the risk of being vulnerable, because that's a vulnerable thing to do. It's like, totally. Feeling a certain way, I'm going to share that with you. I hope it works for you. Like, you know, because, you know, sometimes you could totally see how if somebody's in like not a great way and they receive something like that, they could be pissed off, they could be irritated, they could feel intruded on, whatever. Yeah. You don't know. And I don't. Like, that's just a risk to take of like, this is just how I want to connect with you, you know?
And totally being vulnerable in that moment to say, well, Megan, this is Scully, send.
Yeah. You know, like, I think the thing, and again, like, coming back to the fact that, like, I mean, this whole human soup of experiment that we're all doing together is based off this, in my humble opinion, but I mean, certainly in the work that you folks have done, like you two have done and others, like, we're trading in the currency of emotion. We can't not be. Yeah. Right? If we actually want to be here for one another and help each other along this path and down this journey, like, we have to be, you know, aware of that. Yeah. And you can sure shit feel when somebody is inauthentic, or they're trying to say the right things, but they don't really feel it, you know? Yeah. You can feel that when that happens.
Yeah. And there's another word, authenticity.
Yeah. My favorite term comes from my mindfulness mentor, named Richard Gerling, and he talks about courageous authenticity.
Yeah. And being courageous.
Being authentic. And to bring that back to, kind of loop it back to what you said, is not that box. Yeah. Like, we're all scared to get out of the box. Yeah. And that's the courageous authenticity. In that moment, you knew, this is what I need. I'm going to send it. Okay.
Here it goes.
Away we go. It's off in the universe now.
Yeah. It's inside the world. Yeah.
But that, you know, for me, from a peer support lens, from just, you know, the human experience, I've learned a lot about just being authentic. You know, and that took me, and I'll only speak for me, that takes courage. Like, there's a lot of pieces that you have to wrestle with and come to terms with.
You know, and as you were talking, I kind of talked about authenticity and courage, and I look at a little bit of my career, and I kind of alluded to it as well. Like, I mean, I rose up from volunteer to fire chief, reset my career, and went back to part-time firefighter, and fortunately been sitting where I am today, you know, as a platoon captain in the pilot project. And I honestly don't care about rank. I've already hit reset in my career already once. Like, I'm like, whatever, I guess I got to do this all over again. I'm a firefighter. Knuckle dragging. You've heard me say that term a lot. Yep. So here we go again. And so in the same to reflect on that courageous authenticity, it's like, I don't really care. This is Megan. This is who Scully is. This is what I'm feeling right now. Yeah. I'm being courageous and sending it out, but I'm being very authentic because this is who I am. Totally. You take it or leave it. Like, I'm sorry. I'm that. Too bad. Yeah, exactly. Too bad.
Yeah. And I think, you know, having received it as a gift, one of the things that I will just say is that it's also a feeling of like, warts and all, man. Like, authenticity isn't about impression management, the perfect version of yourself. It's like, here it all is, right? Some of it I'm proud of, some of it I don't particularly like, but it's me, right? And like, if you want to be in the circle and be on the ride, and if we want to have these wild and wonderful relationships, it has to be warts and all.
Totally. 100%. Yeah. It is, it's pretty, but it's pretty.
Let's get our feet out.
Yeah.
I don't want to see my feet after a ruck march. Yeah,
there we go. Yeah. So it's, but no, you're right. It is that, altruistic, courageous authenticity, to be mentally resilient and strong, and being able to share your stories and share what has happened to you, and not for the wrong way, but that's that altruistic, I look at it as the altruistic in a positive way. And kind of going from there, where it's, it truly is, I don't know. I kind of look back and I'm looking on it, and I've got 10 more years left on the floor. Wow. Which is, I look at it and I'm like, whew, that went by fast. So let's make these last 10 years as positive as I possibly can. Let's leave the fire service. Let's leave emergency services. Hopefully just a little bit better than I found it. And if I can help people to continue to have a really cool long career like I have, that's cool. And that's that cool aspect where, it's, I find it, and Megan, you've been privy to this one too, is I went to a conference in Phoenix last year, and out of that conference, I just authentically opened up to a couple of people, and one of them took the BOS program hook, line, and sink and went hard, and love Robert for every moment that he's done it. Then there's people on the West Coast that are like, we need help, and so authentically start that conversation with them. And if I don't care who I am or what moment I'm in at that time, but if it's just authentically who Scully is, and I'll talk about it, that's pretty cool. Like, it is pretty awesome to be able to help spread the word about mental health and how we can stay resilient and have long lasting, meaningful careers.
I think you've succeeded in more than
not done yet.
But you're not done yet. Neither am I. But I think you succeeded in what you've set out to be. You said, you want to continue this change, and change management and change leadership is really what I see. And I firmly believe that you're not done. I know that, but I think looking at where you've come from and where you are now and what you've been able to accomplish, hats off. Yeah, you're on an uphill battle with mental health in an organization, or organizations as a whole, that have really not embraced it. Yeah,
and it's, and somebody asked me, like, when you started your career, like, took the stereotypical picture. Yeah. I had my first turnout coat, which came just above my knees, because that's how coats were back then. Yep. And I had my cat. So, firefighter and cat turnout coat. Took a picture, and I looked back on it, and they said, so, it was like, did you ever think for a moment you'd be doing what you'd be doing in the fire service? And I'm like, not a chance. Did I ever, at the start of my career, did I ever think I was going to be a mental health advocate? I'm like, not a chance. Not for a second, but the journey, the amazing people you meet, it's so cool to be able to look back on it and go, wow, that's pretty special.
It is.
That's pretty awesome. And to be able to say that you've helped one person is huge, because it's something that I would have never thought in the fire service that I would have ever thought of in the inside. Inside your department, you think of helping people outside your department all the time.
People who are closest to you.
But the people that are closest to you, and so it's pretty special. It's pretty cool.
Scully, you were just the coolest.
Sorry.
I just love you. You're so amazing.
Yeah.
We're so fortunate to know you. Like, seriously. I probably
It's likewise.
say your
It's
name every
mutual.
day, and I'm just like, Scully's the best person on earth. You need to meet Scully.
I can absolutely validate that statement.
It's like, shut up about him already.
But I'm just being me.
I know. You're amazing.
Yeah.
I think having you as the first guest on here has just really set the bar, and it's been perfect. And I'm sure that we can sit here for another hour. Because it's an hour.
Oh my goodness. Okay, well, I guess we're done.
Well, we don't have to be, but I mean, let's. I would encourage let's continue the conversation at some point in time.
100%.
I don't know you as well as Megan, but there's a similar trajectory and backgrounds that resonates very, very closely to my heart as well.
Yeah.
And I would definitely love to sit down and go for a paddle.
Yeah. Anytime. It's wide open, and just let it be known that I am so fortunate to have friends like you guys. I know Jeff and Malcolm aren't here, but to be able to even have them in your phone as like people you can lean on.
Mm-hmm.
And I am blessed. I am truly, honestly blessed, and I feel so fortunate. Because people ask me, well, who do you turn to? And I said, I got this little group that I turn to. And I am blessed. I am so fortunate to have you guys, in my life, and you guys are what are pillars in my career to help me continue moving forward and stay strong, because I don't know where I'd be if it wasn't for you guys and doing what you've done and being the support for those, that are still on the front lines, and still there. So I appreciate it. I'm blessed and honored to have you guys as friends. And I truly, the admiration and the love is that way. And I am so grateful.
For the short time I've known you, the feeling goes both ways. Now we just need to go get wet in a river somewhere in the mountains. It'll just solidify everything.
100%. 100%.
Thank you.
I'm going to put on 75 pounds before we do that.
We'll just get you an 8 wet.
Yeah.
You'll be fine. You won't be able to paddle.
It's all good.
You can fall in and be warm.
It's all good.
Thanks.
We'll take care of you. Thank you guys. Thank you so much.